From the Give Me Shelter chapter, which is a non-geographically associated chapter that has members from various regions. Sebastian came to us through an association with one of our board members, Tillman Gruner, at Bonn University, and later became a Google Summer of Code student in 2011, 2012. I will hand it over to you, Sebastian.
Can you hear me all right? A little faint. A little. Okay, let me see. Is that better? Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So, hello everybody. As Jeff has already introduced me, my name is Sebastian Popleau, and today I'm going to talk about threats via USB and why we should care and how we can care. So, the first question is, why should we care at all? Why is USB important and why is it a threat that we have to take care of? What you see in the diagram as sort of a schematic depiction is that your network is the first thing you think of when talking about attacks against organizations and threats. And usually you have very good protection techniques in place in your network, which I depict as a firewall, IDS proxy, whatever. You have good protection from the network side. But similarly, USB flash drives are a means of data exchange with the outside world that you have no protection against. So people can bring USB flash drives from outside, plug them into their machines at work, and exchange data with the outside world without you having any control about it. There are basically two problems associated with that. First is that things can come into your network, so you can get malware, spyware, all sorts of things. And the second problem is that things can get out, so people can copy data to your USB flash drive and then carry it out of your company. Today we're only going to deal with the first case, with malware coming in, so the threat of any form of data and executables coming into your company, thereby circumventing the protection techniques that you have in place in your network. First I want to show you some examples how it really happened that USB became a problem for organizations. And the first thing, the Stuxnet case, I'm sure you have all heard about, so I'm not going to say much about that. It's just, in the Stuxnet case, USB was used to bridge the air gap between the internet-facing part of the network and the inner high-security network. And there was no connection, but via USB flash drive infection, people still managed to get malware into the high-security part of the network. Another rather interesting study, I think, was done by the Department of Homeland Security. And in that study, people just dropped USB flash drives on the parking lot of a company. And then they analyzed what happened to those devices. And it turned out that many employees were curious when they found the things, took them with them, and then just plugged them into their work machines. And here it says 60% of the devices that were picked up on the parking lot were actually attached to a work machine later. So imagine there had been malware on the devices who could easily have infected the company. When there was an official logo on the flash drives, it was even easier to get people to plug them into their machines. So apparently it's rather easy to get your flash drives into a company just by social engineering. So you can get people to circumventing the network protection and taking devices that they have no reason to trust at all and connect them to their work machines, which is a problem, of course. There was an attempt to infect a large chemicals company just this way. So also in that case, USB flash drives were dropped on the parking lot somewhere. And luckily one employee was caught suspicion and informed the IT department. And only this way it was that a large infection was avoided. So there have been cases, and I'm sure there are many more that are not public, where USB was successfully used to infect a company, especially because we have strong protection on the network side. And USB is a rather convenient way to get around this protection. There are many malware families that support USB propagation, so Stuxnet obviously, but also Configure, Flame, and many of the less popular samples support USB propagation. Okay, let's now look at how people actually infect a machine via USB flash drive. There are different sort of techniques, some of which don't work anymore, luckily, but still there is danger. So the infection vector that used to be very popular was autorun, where you would just place an autorun.inf file on your flash drive, which instructed Windows to execute a certain program once the device was attached to the machine. Luckily, this was disabled, I think, in some XP service pack, and later versions don't run autorun files from USB flash drives anymore. So this is, nowadays in modern systems, this is not really a problem anymore. Then we have malicious link files. That was an exploit that was initially found with Stuxnet, where you would copy modified or maliciously crafted link files onto a flash drive, and those link files would cause Windows to execute some code on the device. There was a bug for finding the logo of some file. Windows would actually execute code, and this way you could execute arbitrary code from flash drives, where it's enough for the user to open a window that displays the files on the flash drive. So imagine the case of the employees who find a flash drive on the parking lot. They just have to plug it into their work machines and open the device in Windows Explorer. That's enough for you to infect the machine. This LNK bug was fixed, and up-to-date machines shouldn't be vulnerable to that anymore as well. But obviously there's plenty of chance for there to be other exploits that work in a similar way, right? Just because we fixed one, that doesn't mean that there don't exist any others. Another very successful attack vector is social engineering. So if we can get people to attach a flash drive to their computers by social engineering, why can't we get them to execute a file on that flash drive, right? So one thing that Configure did was to manipulate the dialog that pops up when you attach the device to your computer. You know, there's this dialog asking what do you want to do with the device, like view photos, listen to music, whatever. And one of the menu options says open the files in Explorer. And what Configure did was to add another entry. So programs can add entries to the menu, and it would look exactly like this Explorer entry. So in fact, in the end, you had two entries that look the same, but if you happen to choose the false one, then you would execute the malware. And similarly, there are other techniques how to make people just open a file on the flash drive. I mean, you can just call it somehow that would make people want to see what it is. Like put images on a flash drive that promise to show company secrets, some sort of interesting stuff. There's always a way to make people execute things that are on a flash drive. So we can't really avoid that. We're going to talk about what we can do in a minute. Let me just finish with the last attack vector, the hardware attacks. And those are attacks where you just have a device that looks like storage, like a flash drive, But when you attach it to the computer, then it reports as something else. So people have demonstrated attacks where they would connect a device to the computer, which then identifies as a keyboard. And if you have a keyboard, you can do virtually anything with the current user's rights. So you can open a shell, execute commands. There are many ways to act maliciously on a system if you have control over the keyboard. And if you have a device that just looks like a flash drive, but in fact is the keyboard that plays a predefined key sequence, then you have good chances to successfully attack the machine. So what can we do about it? That's the most important question, right? Of course, we could prohibit USB devices entirely. You could tell all your employees, don't use USB flash drives, they're dangerous, and we don't want them to be used in our company. But obviously, there's a problem with that, because flash drives are just a very convenient way to exchange data, and there are many use cases where you can use them beneficially. So if it's not absolutely necessary, why should you prohibit the devices? For example, I know of a company in my hometown who have completely banned USB flash drives from their employees, and they just have enormous difficulties to transfer data because people have to send it via email or do other things that they are not used to. Of course it's possible, but it's very inconvenient for people to completely avoid USB flash drives. So other options would be to, of course, educate your employees, but I think this only works up to a certain degree. Because as we've seen in the study about dropping flash drives in the parking lot, people are always curious, and people are not always aware of potential security issues. So the usual employee will not think about issues with malware whenever they open a file or find a device that looks so interesting that they have to know what's on it. So while I think it is important to raise awareness among the employees, I don't think that it completely eliminates the problem. So one approach that I've seen used in companies is that you analyze every device that comes from the outside. So whenever someone brings a USB flash drive from the outside, which is the really problematic case, you don't really bother about data transfers from one part of the company to another. There could be issues involved, but the really problematic case is data coming in from the outside. And in the company that I've seen, they had specialized terminals. There's software for that, where you can just attach your device to the terminal and have it scanned before you use it. The problem with that is that people have to do it. So unless you somehow avoid that people directly use unscanned devices on their work machines, you somehow have to make people use those terminals to scan the devices. This might work, but again, it's a hassle for people. People don't want to first go to some place where they can scan their devices before they can use them, right? So this is another option to improve security, but at the cost of losing convenience, of course. So our idea, or what we presented last year and have since been developing, is to say, while we can't completely avoid infections, we can try, but we're not sure that we can avoid infections. So why don't we find a way to detect them at least? And this is why we published Ghost. That's a system that aims at detecting infections with USB malware. And the idea is that USB malware is characterized by the fact that it propagates via USB flash drive. And once you have a machine that is infected within your company, chances are that if you attach a flash drive to the infected machine, then the malware will try to propagate via that flash drive. Okay, so Basically what we do is we just constantly plug in the flash drive and look what happens. If there is malware on the system, then it will somehow write itself to the flash drive. And while we can't do that in hardware with a physical flash drive, you can't attach it to all your machines periodically, we can do it in software emulation. And that's exactly the core of Ghost. It emulates the USB flash drive in the Windows kernel, so we wrote some driver that does the emulation. And by emulating a flash drive, we entice malware that might be present to write itself to this emulated flash drive. And if that happens, we know that there is malware present on the system. So while we can't avoid the infection entirely, we can immediately detect when a machine is infected. So this is not going to protect you completely. You need to combine it with other means of protection. But the idea is that if something gets through and something infects our machines, we can detect it and we can act accordingly. Actually, that's so we're still developing this, and one of the immediate goals for the future is to make several instances of Ghost communicate. So the expected deployment of this is that all of your machines run Ghost. It's very efficient and doesn't consume many resources. So every machine runs Ghost, and once a machine detects an infection with malware, you would inform all the other machines in the network, and then the others could react accordingly. For example, you could just reject any USB flash drive that you see in the future, or you could reject network communication from the infected machine. You can think of many ways how to protect yourself once you know that there is an infected machine in your network and which machine it is. Okay, I don't have the time to really go deeply into the technical details of Ghost. So it's open source and freely available. You have the URL in case you want to have a look at the code or just try it out. Let me rather show you a screenshot of how the interface looks like. And yeah, what you see is an example detection. So in this case, I ran Ghost, and some process wrote data to the flash drive, some malicious process. In this case, it was just explorer.exe, or maybe some malware that injected code into the Explorer process. But the important point is that Ghost detects whenever something on your computer writes to flash drives. So usually there shouldn't be anything. Unless the user copies data to a flash drive, there shouldn't be anything writing data to a flash drive, unless it's malicious. That's the basic assumption, and we detect whenever something is written to a flash drive. Okay, as I said, I can't go into the technical details, but I'm sure if you're interested, we can talk about that after the talk. So for now, thank you for your attention, and if there are questions, I'm happy to answer. I'm sorry?
If we have link bug, you have mentioned the link bug for what is this? LNK file.
The LNK file. What about those files?
Yes, so we can script the code, right?
Yes.
So when a malware needs to transfer to the USB, so I can that's script there some code. So why to transfer to the USB?
The trick is you need to somehow get the user to view a folder with your manipulated files. And USB is one option for you to get the user to open a directory with your manipulated files. And only then can you execute. So you need the user to open your flash drive for the code to execute. At the moment we support XP and Windows 7. Technically there shouldn't be any reason why it shouldn't work on other Windows versions. The problem is just that we don't have the resources to do the testing on all the other machines. But yeah, Windows 7 is the main target at the moment, and in time we'll also move it to Windows 8. The deployment model would be that you install Ghost on all of your machines, all the machines that you think are at risk. And the administrative model at the moment is, yeah, this is on the agenda and will be in a month or two, it will be realized. So I'm planning that all the instances communicate on the network, and that you have a central place where you collect all the detection information from all the machines. So once this is done, in I'd say 2 months, you will have a central place where you have a log of all the activities from the machines running Ghost.
Can the attackers detect the emulation environment?
That's a good question. Of course, it's very important for us not to be detectable, right? If the attackers can detect that the flash drive is emulated, then the whole point is lost. I've put a lot of effort into making the thing hard to distinguish from a real flash drive. Of course, it's emulation and it can't be perfect, but the point is that it requires a lot of effort from malware authors to distinguish the emulated device from a physical flash drive. So in the present state, it should require a lot more effort to distinguish this than what malware authors do at the moment. Any other questions? Tilma?
Yeah, so I'm just curious, Sebastian. What we see with lots of targeted attacks is that people try to lure you into executing a file that's malicious, and I guess this kind of social engineering can be combined perfectly with USB drives, attacks that involve USB drive. And I'm just curious, have you seen anything like that, like double file extension or malicious documents that are executable or something like that?
I haven't seen much targeted stuff with this respect, but I'm sure that it is there. And the problem is that because it is targeted, we just don't get to see it publicly, right? So I'm sure that, as you say, USB is a very good way to execute such targeted attacks, but at present I'm not aware of anything publicly known.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut this short. We're out of time, but we have lunch coming up, and I encourage anyone with questions for any speaker to please approach the speaker at lunch.
Okay, thanks everyone.